This is the Moog Muse. It's an 8-voice stereo polyphonic analog synth with a 61-key keyboard. The 8 voices are programmable through a mod map, and there are some cool features. Check it out. Each patch on the Muse has 2 timbres, so different sounds that can be split or stacked. And that's just one of the many cool tricks this synth can do. In this video, I'm delving deep into the Moog Muse to demo its most interesting features. Could this be the modern Moog that everybody wants? And does it still have that classic Moog sound? Let's find out. It's been a while since we saw a full-featured synth with keyboard from Moog, so this is pretty exciting. And if that Moog 1 was tempting, this may be a more affordable option and certainly more convenient to carry around. And hey, I want to thank Analog Cases for sponsoring this video. If you struggle to get your gear at the right angle or just want a nicer way to manage your setup, Analog Cases makes these things. You've probably seen these on my channel before. It's called the XTS Desktop Stand System, and it's great for using with lots of stuff around your studio or while performing. You can configure the stand in 2 ways, with the optional flex tray or without it. These stands support up to 25 pounds and they're very stable. And you can adjust the length easily. They come in 2 different sizes as well, so whatever you've got, they probably have a size for you. These stands are very affordable, so it's a small investment for a really nice look and convenience in your studio. I've been using these stands for a while in my studio and would highly recommend them. If you're interested in the XTS stands by Analog Cases, I'll add links in the video description. The Muse has 2 oscillators here and actually another dedicated modulation oscillator to the left as well. There are 2 filters, 2 envelopes, a voltage-controlled amp, 2 LFOs with a bunch of different wave shapes, an arpeggiator, a 64-step sequencer, and a digital diffusion delay over on this side. The delay is pretty cool. I'll let you hear it a bit later. There's also this macro knob, which you can use with the mod map features to apply subtle changes to the sound, or even drastic changes, and then morph between the 2 settings. They've already mapped the macro knob on the presets they've included, and this is a fun way to try out sounds right away. Instant gratification. This kind of reminds me of the morph knob on the Arturia Polybrute, but I think Moog is going for something more subtle here. And of course, you've got the screen for deeper settings and buttons that select banks or patches by default. You may notice on each module here, there's a little triangle. That's kind of like a more button. I really like this idea. It feels like it's borrowed from software, like a menu at the top right of an app or something. These buttons lead you to advanced settings and more sound sculpting options. Some other controls include your pitch and mod wheels, glide control, octave up and down, and a hold button, which is nice to use with the arpeggiator. You've also got a pitch LFO and a global clock tempo here. Right in the middle is a mixer for your oscillators and noise and the overload slider. And on the right, we've got a nice simple chord function as well. Things are laid out pretty well, kind of quintessential Moog with the classic knobs and sliders. The keyboard has 61 keys with velocity sensitivity, of course, as well as aftertouch. Nothing extremely interesting about the aftertouch. This is not a poly aftertouch or MPE keypad. That would have been nice to add some expressive control. But what do you think? Do you think you'd actually use a keyboard with those extras? Comment below. Now, the keyboard's tracking, velocity, and aftertouch can be routed as modulation sources as well. And you've got glide and octave up and down here. So, getting started is easy. Just select a patch from the banks here. You've got 16 patch slots for each of the 16 banks. It's fun to explore patches in tandem with the macro knob, which gives you some variation in sound. And you have the voice control section as well, where you can select a timbre variation. Or you can split or stack them. You can also control parameters for both timbres by selecting both and adjusting something on the synth. If you want the initial patch, there's a button dedicated to it right here. So start from here to create your own sounds from scratch. So yeah, this can sound like a classic Moog. So where does the sound come from? The two oscillators here can make sounds from triangle to sawtooth, and you can mix in square and pulse waveforms as well. You can use the slider to mix between the two waveform knobs. You can use the sliders here to mix in the two oscillators, and you can quickly adjust the octave of each oscillator as well. Now, there is a third oscillator, the modulation oscillator to the left. I'm going to turn on the audio and keyboard tracking, and let's raise it up on the mixer here. This oscillator can be used as a pure third oscillator, and you get some other waveforms, including sine, ramp, and noise. And you can also use it as an LFO with per voice functionality. For example, you can have the modulation oscillator set to create a vibrato effect. Each note you play will have its own vibrato that can vary slightly from other notes. This creates a more complex and rich sound, as opposed to a single modulation source affecting all notes equally. Now, all this good noise-making stuff can be mixed here using the sliders. And there's also this ring modulator in the middle as well to blend in some metallic sounds between the main two oscillators. There's also a noise slider here. You can't change the noise type, it's just white. But also you have this overload slider that gives you some extra saturation and soft clipping to the entire mix. Moog says they reconfigured the mixer compared to previous Moog so that you don't get saturation while mixing, except if you really want it and use that overload function. So let's talk about the two filters included. But before we do, if this video is interesting or useful, can you help me out by hitting the subscribe button? It's totally free and would help me reach my 1 million subscriber goal. We're at 479,000 right now, and every click of the subscribe button helps me bring more content and value to you. So yeah, the filters. Both of these are ladder filters based on the Moog 904A from the 1960s. It's the same as the Model D. You can switch the first filter from low pass to high pass. The second is a dedicated low pass filter. You can get the classic Moog sounds with this filter. You can link both filters as well, and then control both with the cutoff knob on the right. You can also set how the audio passes through the filters. Serial to have the signal go through filter 1 and then 2, or stereo, where the left channel goes into the first filter and right goes into the second, or parallel, where the audio goes through both simultaneously. When you do this, the cutoff for the first filter acts as an offset between the two. Keyboard tracking is available as well in either half tracking or full tracking, and you've got envelopes for each filter as well to control how much the filter's cutoff is modulated by the filter envelope to the right with ADSR. So there are lots of ways to take yourself from a static sound to dynamic movements. Let's talk about macro, timbre, and the assign buttons you'll find around the keyboard. And we'll get into some of the mod mapping features. All right, the macro knob gives you a nice way to dynamically modify sounds while performing. The voice control gives you some extras as well, and I'll get to that in a sec. So the macro knob is a programmable control that doesn't have a default function. Instead, you can assign it to control one or more parameters with the synth. You can assign multiple parameters to the macro knob. For example, you might want the macro knob to simultaneously increase the filter cutoff while decreasing the resonance. You can do that pretty quickly. You can control this through the assignable controller section or the modulation map, where you specify which parameters the macro knob will affect and by how much. You can set the modulation depth for each parameter, meaning you can control how much each parameter changes when you turn the macro knob. Once you've assigned the parameters, you can use the macro knob to create complex sound modulations easily. Turning the knob will adjust the assigned parameters simultaneously, allowing you to morph your sound in interesting and creative ways. And adjusting a bunch of parameters can get you some interesting morphs. You'll see some other buttons here as well. These are assignable controllers. For example, you can assign aftertouch to modulate, or even the keyboard velocity, mod wheel, and expression pedal here as well. So all the mod functions are here in one place. Now, in the same way that we assign some mods using the macro control, you can use the assign button. You'll see them in a number of places like LFO, filter envelope. These are used to quickly assign modulation sources to parameters. Press assign, then move the control you want to be modulated, and then confirm. Now, I've shown you several ways to create mods with the macro knob from the assign button. And of course, you can also create them straight in the mod map using the buttons here. Let's create another modulation using the mod map itself. The Muse is a bitimbral synthesizer, meaning it can produce two different sounds or timbres simultaneously. Each timbre can be independently programmed and controlled. The voice controls section allows you to manage how the synth's 8 voices are distributed between the two timbres. This includes setting up splits and stacks. Press either the A or B to activate which timbre you want to play or edit. split divides the keyboard into two zones, with timbre A in the lower zone and timbre B in the upper. The split point can be adjusted in the settings. Stack layers timbre A and B together so both timbres are playing simultaneously on each key press. This is useful for creating some richer sounds. The VCA knob up here controls the volume of the currently active timbre, A or B, before it reaches the summing bus. This allows you to balance the levels of the two timbres when they are stacked or split. The Muse has two LFOs right here that can be used to modulate a parameter to add some movement to your sounds. These LFOs can be assigned to control things like the pitch of an oscillator or the filter cutoff. This is great for creating vibrato, tremolo, and rhythmic filter sweeps as well. Each LFO offers adjustable waveforms, including sine, triangle, and more. The rate and amplitude of the LFOs can be controlled either globally or per voice using the advanced triangle button. From this menu, you have controls to sync to tempo and phase control to get things in line with the rhythm of your music. And you've got some other interesting waves in here as well. The pitch LFO on the Muse is a dedicated low-frequency oscillator specifically designed to modulate the pitch of the oscillators, adding vibrato effects to your sound. You can change the waveforms and the rate, and this can be assigned to each oscillator individually or both together. The pitch LFO is useful for adding a subtle or pronounced vibrato to lead and solo sounds. They've included a lot of options on the arpeggiator here. Right away, you've got a division knob and direction. And you have the advanced button that will let you get to swing and a lot of other patterns, as well as syncopated rhythms. Use the hold button on the left to hold some notes, and your arpeggiator is going. Okay, let's talk about the sequencer. You have 256 sequences, each with up to 64 steps. You can record by steps or live, and you've also got quantization. And you can automate parameters in your sequences too. So things like filter cutoff, LFO rate, etc. They've also included probability and random modes. The generative probability sequencer features are really fun to experiment with. To create a sequence, select a sequence bank. 15 and 16 are user assignable. Then press the record button, and each note or chord you press will be recorded in. You can automate parameters as well by clicking the parameter record under the screen and moving something. By the way, Moog has included a lot of sequences right in here already. The chord feature is pretty straightforward. To have the Muse learn a chord, press the Learn button, play a chord, confirm, and then press On. You You can also combine the chord feature with the ARP and sequencer to input full chords into steps. All right, what about the effects? Well, they've included diffusion delay on the Muse. The delay is digital and they're modeling early digital delay rack units. You can use it to add some depth, space, and texture, and can even feel like reverb. The controls you've got include delay, time, and feedback, and they've also got a character knob to adjust between darker and brighter sound characters. You can use the diffusion delay to create things like slap delays all the way up to some reverb sounding stuff. So the build of the Muse is Moog through and through. And by that, I mean it feels premium. The buttons and the knobs have a premium classic Moog look and feel. The body is metal, and on the side you've got some nice wood. They've kind of built this thing for studio and stage. On the back, you've got your main audio outs via TRS, sustain and expression pedal ports, CV ports for clock and in and out, and you have two USB connectors as well. One is for connecting to a computer or host MIDI device, and the other is for connecting to another keyboard or synth and using the Muse as the controller. On the far side, you have power and a power switch. You've also got a headphones out in the front. So I've taken you through lots of features. The Muse is certainly very capable, and there are lots of ways to create sounds. But what's missing? Well, first, I would have loved to have had chorus on this synth. I applied a chorus using one of Moog's own plugins in my DAW, and it just took the sound to new heights. Having it on the synth itself would have been cool, even though you could get something close with the LFOs and the pan spread. But it's just not the same though. Also, it would have been nice to have some cool aftertouch features like poly aftertouch. It would have just improved the expressive options on the synth. Finally, this is not a cheap synth. You're paying for that Moog quality. The build is exceptional, and there's definitely a premium for the Moog heritage that comes with an instrument like this. But if you want a Moog with a lot of onboard features, you get a lot with the Muse. Now, is this synth a must-have? Well, not for everyone. These days, you can create amazing music with just a computer, and there are lots of nice synth plugins out there. And of course, there are lots of inexpensive, but still very capable hardware synths out there as well. But having a synth like this with so much hands-on control and the classic analog Moog sound we all love is something special. And once you get your hands on something this premium, it's hard to go back to a MIDI controller and plug it. I think Moog has really thought through the modern features we wanted to see on a synth from them. If you're interested in learning more about the Moog Muse, I'll add links to the best prices below the video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Keep making the music you love, and I'll see you soon.